Baseball podcast. I'm Colby Conway at Colby R. Conway, and Matt, there is a ton of stuff to get through this week, but it would not be very play of me to not ask, how is everything going for you?
It's going well. Had a entertaining Memorial Day weekend. A lot of racing that I watched, a lot of baseball that I watched, grilled some, and we're actually going to a baseball game tonight in town. So should be a fun way to wrap up kind of Memorial Day weekend as a whole.
I grilled a little bit as well. I can probably assume, based on what I saw from some of your tweets or the grill versus grill thing, that it was not as elaborate as what you did. But I did turn the propane on, put some stuff on the grill, and shut the grill off. So I'm going to call that grilling.
Yeah, I had it was a good time. I grilled a couple of times. I grilled some breakfast on Monday morning for the fam, grilled for the grill versus grill, and then I won that bet. So that was great.
There you go. I just grilled some sausages. It was nice for Memorial Day after doing the Murph workout. If anyone knows that, I am hurting immensely today. So we're gonna get through this though. Luckily, my pain in my quads and arms doesn't prohibit me from talking baseball. And maybe I can feel like some of these guys who are a little bit injured, although theirs are probably far worse than what mine is, as mine will go away in a couple of days. But let's start in Baltimore with Cedric Mullins running down the baseline. Did not look good. Immediately held his groin, stopped, couldn't finish running out the play. I don't know. Groin strain, don't like that. Some are saying right abductor and groin strain, so that's going to be involved for a guy that can run. That's going to wreak some havoc. It's likely going to keep him out for a little bit. I don't believe he's been put on the IL yet, but it would not surprise me if he ends up making his way. If he ends up making his way there, it's just for what it is, it's too important to his game. I would imagine they play it safe and put him on the IL, and maybe, it'll probably come in the next couple of days. Are you kind of thinking the same type thing with Mullins?
Yeah, I don't think you can avoid the IL with a groin strain. Even if you're not going to play the guy, which you're not going to, you're in the heat of a very tight AL East. You can't afford to go with an empty, spot on your bench for a few days. So I would imagine that. I wonder if they're going to do this. I wonder if they're waiting for Grayrod to make a start down in the minors and then put Mullins on the IL and call Grayrod back up, because that would be a way around his minimum 15-day stay in the minors, because injuries get around that. That's a possibility. They could call up. There's a couple of bats that they could go with too. There's some guys who are smoking the baseball down at AAA that I wouldn't be shocked if they get a shot to come up. But yeah, it might be a day or two before they put him on there.
Yeah, it seems like he is heading there. So fantasy managers will have to look to replace Mullins' 8 homers and 13 stolen bases that he has through 53 games on the season. It's gonna be tough to overcome, just because his 263 average is even above average, so he's really doing multiple categories. So replacing him.
Here's an idea for Baltimore. Since the Reds have nowhere to play Jonathan India, according to Ken Rosenthal, why don't the Orioles just trade for Jonathan India and thereby solve everybody's problem? The Orioles get another bat. The Reds don't have to worry about where to play their MVP caliber player when they call up another guy. And all is good. And then Ken Rosenthal looks like a genius for saying the Reds had no place to play him.
Yep, I find it hard to believe let's just say India remains where his average where it is. I have a hard time believing you can't find some playing time for a guy who's currently pacing to hit 290 with 15 homers and 20 plus stolen bases on the year. I find that hard to believe personally, but
he played a little bit of everywhere.
Exactly. And what do I know? I'm just sitting here looking at stats and numbers. So what do I know? San Diego, down year so far this season. Juan Soto was scratched over the weekend with back tightness. Matt, this is one of those ones. It starts off as nothing. Everyone's very ho-hum about it. Next thing you know, they miss a game. They miss another game. They maybe pinch hit, maybe not. And then an IL stint comes later with like back soreness, or maybe they keep the tightness, but then you hear like back strain or something like that. So what do we make here of Juan Soto's back tightness?
I don't know. I know that people want answers, right? But back tightness It depends on the guy, really, to be honest. I mean, Soto, I feel like, is a guy who can kind of play through it based on the balance in his swing. He's not putting a whole lot of load on any one specific spot, unlike some other guys. Um, I know he just started to turn things around over the last month. He's been one of the best hitters in baseball. Absolutely nuked a ball at Yankee Stadium like that ball was crushed at Yankee Stadium. Um, so we'll see. I mean, worst case scenario is that he turns into like Victor Robles, who went on the IL with back spasms, and as of Monday night was still not imminently close to coming back. Um, Best case scenario, he misses maybe a series and then he's back in the lineup. So it kind of depends, but I have a little bit of faith in the Padres um, training staff to get through it.
And he's expected to be in the lineup on as we're recording this on Tuesday. So tonight he's expected to be in the lineup, but keep an eye on it. Soto's young too. I do think that helps, especially in terms of this. So I wouldn't be too concerned about Soto compared to some of the other guys we're going to
Yeah, I
talk
mean
about.
Machado had an issue last year, and he missed like 9 out of 11 days, but they kept him off the IL and kind of rested it or whatnot. We could see something like that where he plays a couple of days on and then he gets a day off and then whatnot.
Could be something like that. The Giants had to go ahead and put Tyro Estrada on the 10-day injured list with a left wrist sprain hurting it in one of his final at bats. And this Estrada is a guy I have a lot of ownership of this season, hitting 301, 6 home runs, 13 stolen base, 30 runs scored. He's been really, really good and really building on to a really, really good last year in 2022 as well, when he hit 14 homers and stole 21 bags. So I don't like wrist issues. We talked about it a good bit with hitters. It may sap a little bit of his power coming back, but Estrada was a guy we probably weren't banking for much more than last year's 14 homers anyway. So it's I don't think it'll be as detrimental to him, but maybe when he comes back, there's going to be a little bit of rust, knock a few points off the old batting average that he's got there. But what are you thinking here with Estrada? We're not dropping him. It shouldn't be too terribly long of a stint on the IL. It seems it more so seems upon his return, we're going to have to temper expectations a little bit, at least in the first couple, maybe days, maybe even weeks.
Yeah, I would say so. Look, the Giants are going to mix and match. They're pretty good with analytics. We've seen that over the last few years with Gabe Kapler, manager in their front office that came straight from the Dodgers and and the Rays. So they're going to mix and match. We'll see. Maybe some Blake Sable in the outfield a little bit more. Mitch Haniger, Conforto can fill in. They got Patrick Bailey up right now who can play catcher, so you don't necessarily need Sable back there. He could DH as well. So there's a few different ways they can go. They could also just come up and, call up some 26-year-old nobody's ever heard of who's just a solid baseball player and comes up and hits like he was meant for it. So I'm not that concerned. We're not dropping Estrada. I think at this point, outfield is fairly easy to find guys on the waiver wire to float you by for a week or so. But I think he'll be all right. Might be a slow couple weeks when he gets back, and then he should be good.
Yep, and I think that's the case. And if you want to look at it this way too, if he does get on base, wrist shouldn't affect his running while he's
Right.
taking care of that wrist. He can keep his lower half in action. Everything will be fine there. So when he comes back, I think the running will be fine.
Be good.
Yep, I think he'll be good there. In Milwaukee, Willie Adames went to the injured list with a concussion on a freak incident. It's a concussion. It's going to have to run its course. Hopefully, he doesn't miss too much time past his minimum stay on the injured list. But when you look at this Milwaukee lineup, I know Owen Miller got banged up, so his kind of status is in flux as we're waiting for lineups here to begin the week. But what else can Milwaukee do here? I mean, Bryce Terang probably slides over to shortstop from second base, becomes a pretty regular player here while Adames is out. It almost seems like a lineup with already a bunch of strikeout issues. I mean, Adames was kind of a relatively sizable part of that too, but it seems like this might be a team to pick against here. I mean, they're bad against lefties. We know that. You attack Milwaukee with lefties, but with no Adames, this lineup does lose a little bit of pop.
It does. It does for sure. So yeah, I would expect Terang to slide over, play shortstop. I think he kind of split time there in the minors, although second base was his main spot in the minors. Um, so yeah, I think that's what they do for the time being. Concussion ILs, by the way, I believe are 7-day instead of the 10-day. So it is what it is. There's no guarantee it only takes a week, right? We've seen, across all sports, we've seen guys suffer concussions and be out for months. We've seen guys suffer concussions and come back and be ready to go 3 days before their minimum stay is up, right? Everybody's different. It is a brain injury. Clearly, there's protocols in place. So it's going to be what it'll be. For those of you who are in a league in which 5 games played at a position get you position eligibility, maybe Terang scores you some extra eligibility here, because if he plays shortstop full time while Ademis is out, then we can add shortstop and second base to him. So that's about it. I mean, it's not, concussions are still the gray area of injuries, right? It's not like, oh, he's out like 4 to 6 weeks with a sprain, or he had surgery, he'll be back after it heals. Concussions are to each their own.
No two are the same. That's probably the best way to call it with concussions. And Matt, I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. Hopefully, if you picked up Jason Adam when Pete Fairbanks was hurt before, hopefully you held on, or if he's still out there, go get him. Fairbanks is heading back to the injured list with a hip issue. So Jason Adam is back. His strikeout rate is up from last year. ERA, low threes. That's fine. We'll take it. But he does have 7 saves on the year already with 5 holds. So if you're in a Solds league, or maybe saves plus holds, however you coin that term, Adam is back as the 9th inning man for Tampa Bay. Matt, do you think he's a must-own in all formats that value saves at this point?
I would say so. Look, Tampa's playing in a lot of close games at this point. Yes, I know they got blown out last week like 20-1 by Toronto, but that's a fluke, right? You don't get blown out by 19 runs every game unless you're like, I don't know, Oakland. But yeah, he's gonna get the save chances. Tampa generally likes to have one guy in the 9th. They mix and match elsewhere, but it's typically been one guy in the 9th. So I would expect Jason Adam, who was challenging for the closer role in spring, to get the bulk of the save chances at this point.
Yep, I am there with you. Another reliever, more so just a feel-good story, is Liam Hendricks is back for the White Sox. I believe he pitched the 8th inning yesterday as we record this. So on Monday, I believe he threw the 8th inning. You want to look at the number. His velo was down. Duh. It was probably going to be. He's working his way back still from a very serious, I'm not going to say injury, a life condition.
Yes.
Working his way back from that. And despite the diminished velocity, his whiff rates still look good. Like, he was still generating swings and misses. So if he's going to get those whiffs while his velo is down, if he's working his way back, watch out. So kind of the same thing with Adam. To me, Hendricks, I'd go get him now. It's only a matter of time before they put him back in the 9th. And I know the White Sox have been can I say travesty or dumpster fire? Which of those terms would you use?
A travesty of a dumpster fire?
Okay. A travesty of a dumpster fire. There's still value. Like we talked about, you don't have to be on the best team in the league to get save chances.
Correct.
White Sox aren't going to win games by a ton. So Hendricks, you in the same boat. He's a must-own at this point. I mean, I think he's got to be.
Yeah. I mean, for those of you who drafted him, hoping that he would come back at some point early in the season and work back, congrats. I've had a few people in my home leagues that did that. One of them now gets him for basically 3 years for cheap because he waited long enough to not pick him up. But yeah, I would go get him. If you're hunting for saves, it might be a little bit of a slow burn to get the saves from him, but they're coming. And as bad as Chicago's been, all you need to do is win close games to get saves. And that's what Chicago's capable of doing. Yes, they're going to lose more than they win right now, but it's still the reason why Oakland's closer is usable. Even though they haven't won that many games, every game they've won has been close. So, like, that's what I'm trying to tell people. You don't actually want to target the closers on really good offenses because more often than not, like, only a fraction of their wins are they going to get in the game. Whereas teams with mediocre or bad offenses, the closer gets in a higher percentage of their team wins.
Yep. And I mean, sure, 3 hits, 2 earned runs in that outing, but it's going to take some time, like you said, for him to get back in the ninth. Still got some whiffs, so the strikeouts will come. And just interestingly enough, he is owned in 83% of Fantrax leagues and 25% of ESPN fantasy leagues.
So my question is, does Fantrax have IL or deeper benches than ESPN leagues? Or do
could
they
be.
just have smarter fantasy players? Sorry for any background noise. My cat is deciding to use her scratching post at the moment. Always a circus in the Selz household.
I would say ESPN's probably like their default is probably much shorter leagues or shorter benches than
Yeah.
Fantrax, I would
Also, if
probably
you're
say.
playing in like a 10 or 12 team, there's no point in holding a guy who hasn't been active.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure his ownership is going to shoot through the roof this week during waivers.
Or for ESPN leagues that do points, some points leagues devalue relief pitchers.
Correct, because
So that
unless
could be
he's the
involved.
closer, he's not getting you. I mean, you could sneak in some wins, but
Yeah.
that's not happening in middle relief for Chicago.
Yeah, probably not with him. And then one I want to talk about here, we're going to get to a little bit of the name that player with the, I'm going to put some quotes, but prospect edition here. But we did get one prospect back from a torn ACL, Royce Lewis, and homered in his first game with the Twins this season. What do you think of Lewis kind of as a prospect overall and like long term, but mainly for those in redraft leagues for the 2023 season in particular?
So I have loved him for a while. It was a question for me when they took him number 1 overall a few years ago, but he has rounded into what you would expect from a number 1 overall prospect. The guy's a 5-tool player. The only concern I have is exactly where he's going to play defensively, because he's mainly been a shortstop in the minors. That's where they drafted him. That's what he came up as. He did get a little bit of versatility tossed in there with some outfield work, some third base work. I think he played a tad bit of second base, but it's mainly been shortstop. Here's the problem. They signed Carlos Correa back in this offseason. And sure, could they move Correa to third base? Maybe.
Correa was the guy with the foot issue, right?
Yes, or leg, or what? The surgically repaired something or
And
other.
now has a lower extremity issue.
Yes.
Okay. Carry on.
Yeah. So perhaps they move him to third base, which is maybe a little easier on the body than shortstop is. Or maybe Royce Lewis becomes a super utility guy. Yet to be seen. He has enough speed to play some of the outfield, although I don't really think they need center field help with Michael A. Taylor and Byron Buxton capable of being back there. So we'll see. That's my only concern with Royce Lewis is defensively where he plays long term. Other than that, when he came up for a bit last year, he looked spectacular. In his, I think it was like 12-game stint, he hit, I think, 300 in that stint, if memory serves. So the bat and the homers and the speed aren't a concern. It's just where you're going to find a room for him on a daily basis.
And then in the minors, we've seen his ability to kind of really harness the strikeouts. He'll post a moderate to decent walk rate. And then last year, 12 games, hit an even 300, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 5 stolen bases. Didn't run at all last year, but we've seen at different stops at the minors, and
no, but he was
AAA.
coming back from, so like they just wanted him on the field. You don't want to take the risk of him coming back from an ACL by stealing, right? No added risk is a good one for a guy as highly touted as Royce Lewis has been since being drafted number 1 overall.
And if he can be any sort of consistent presence on offense, I think the Minnesota lineup would definitely like that, as they are.
Oh God, yeah, they need any help they can get.
They're really fun to pick against for player props and stuff, just because they can go like ice cold would be a compliment. They can go like I forget that substance, but it's like in all the TV shows when it comes out in that giant cauldron and it's all smoking and you can't
liquid
like
nitrogen.
put your that's it. Like they're like that when
Yeah,
they're
it's
cold.
like negative 200 something degrees Fahrenheit.
That checks out for that offense at times. I think that checks out. So we'll have to see, but Royce Lewis, definitely a guy you want to add.
Real quick, I want to ask you about Garrett Cole's struggles of late. He seems to be being a victim of the long ball here. In 4 of his last 5 starts, he's given up 2 homers in each start. He's been tagged for 5 earned runs in 3 of his last 5 starts. In a couple of those, he actually was credited with giving up 6, but only 5 earned. So thanks to the, defense for saving him a run, I guess. Strikeouts are still there. The walks are a little bit of an issue. I mean, clearly we're not dropping Garrett Cole, but I'm just wondering, are we panicking a little bit that something has changed or just a rough stretch?
Yeah, I'm more inclined to believe a rough stretch because when you look at his numbers, yes, over the last 5 starts, was that 2, 4, 8 home runs, but in the ones prior to that, there were no home runs at all. Now, then again, in his last couple of starts, Tampa Bay twice, Baltimore, San Diego. Not horrible offense, especially Tampa Bay, but those lineups can pack a little bit of a punch. So it's not like he didn't go out there and serve up, 3 home runs to Oakland and 2 to Minnesota on a cold, when they're the liquid nitrogen levels. I'm more inclined to believe it's just a bit of a rough patch. And then when you look to, I'm trying to get this, and of course now I'm not going to get it correctly, but in his last 5 starts, when we're looking at it here, 24.2% home run to fly ball ratio. Fly ball rate is pretty similar to what it's been for the year overall. Ground balls are down in that stretch, but hard hit is up. So, fly balls and hard hits doesn't always exactly lead to success, but that 24.2% home run to fly ball ratio seems, it's an outlier. I'm more inclined to chalk this up to a rough stretch. That's just where I'm kind of at with it.
Okay. I would watch it with warmer weather kicking in because my concern is that it happened once the calendar flipped basically to May. He did have one start on the 2nd of May where he looked pretty good against Cleveland, but Cleveland's offense is...
Everybody's looked good against Cleveland.
Yeah, exactly. So my only concern is... is it the warmer weather that might be leading to a little bit more home runs? But we'll see. He's still an SP1. I'm not, saying, trade him because he's washed up. No, he'll be fine. But it is a little disconcerting to watch a spike happen to a guy like Garrett Cole.
And maybe the other way to look at it is this just regression to the mean because the past 3 years his homer per nine's been 1.7, 1.1, and 1.4.
True.
So maybe should his first handful of starts for the year be considered the
outlier
to one to one extreme, and this is just the outlier to the other extreme, and we're just going to eventually meet in the middle, and he's going to be a 1 to a 1.3 homer per 9 guy like he's been the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, because he's right now at 0.98 home runs per 9, which over the course of a full season would be his third lowest in his career. He put up a 0.48 in 208 innings with Pittsburgh, put up a 0.85 in 200 innings with Houston. I know he had a couple that were lower, but that's only 116 and 138 innings. So
yeah,
maybe he's just regressing to the mean all at one time.
Yep. Yep. I think so there as well. But of course, Matt, we talked to Royce Lewis. Want to talk a little bit of prospects. We like the name that player game. I'm going to take it. First one's going to be pretty easy on you here. We only got a couple minutes left, but let's start with the first one. So this guy, I literally just made my Major League Baseball debut, and my ability to hit triple digits catches everyone's eye. I have 44 strikeouts across 28 and 2/3 innings in the minors, and I've never pitched in back-to-back days. I have a great sinking fastball, but significant question marks beyond that in my repertoire, and a path to ninth inning work isn't exactly clear at this point. Who is this trending AL West relief pitcher?
That would be Ben Joyce of the Angels.
It sure would, with it's a
Who, let me
two-seamer.
check my watch. Oh, did he have Tommy John yet? It's coming, right? Like, if you watch clips of his delivery, it's pretty herky-jerky. It's pretty max effort to hit 102. And that sinker doesn't sink. So I don't know what he's doing, but he's figured out how to make a rising sinker. His stuff is gross, but if all you have is one pitch, that's not ideal. So I'm going to let somebody else pick him up right now and just deal with it, because I think he's going to get figured out or get injured, and I don't think he gets you saves because there's like 6 other dudes in front of him in the Angels bullpen for saves.
And they're not going to throw him back-to-back days.
No. He's never done it. And at max effort, I don't think he can.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think that's the case. And we'll have to see, because eventually, like we've seen with all guys, his 102, 103, 104 mile an hour fastball, at some point the league will adjust. They will catch up. What's the next pitch?
Everybody figured out Aroldis Chapman throwing literally the fastest pitch in the history of Major League Baseball.
It just takes time.
Yep.
That's all it takes is time. So just be cautious with Joyce. Don't get enamored by the hype. He's not going to be the ninth inning guy. He's not pitching back-to-back days. So even if he throws 3 times in a week for you, best case scenario, 3 innings, 9 strikeouts. That's basically what you're hoping for, best case scenario. And he'll get figured out eventually. But the last one here before we wrap up this episode. So, Matt, I broke camp with the team, and a recent surge has pushed my average up to 284 on the year, not to mention a 485 slug and a 120 WRC plus. I have no significant split disadvantages as I'm hitting at least 280 against both lefties and righties, and I've secured first and third base eligibility for my NL Central squad. Depending on league settings, I may even have eligibility at second base, as I made a couple appearances there. My 162 game pace sees me hitting 22 home runs with 81 RBI, 90 runs scored, and 45 doubles. And Ken Rosenthal has guaranteed my spot in the infield. So, who is this? NL Central infielder Ken Rosenthal is basically said that his spot is safe in the team's infield. The initials are, it's an alliteration, I believe is the term.
It's an alliteration.
Much like Colby Conway.
Nicely done. Broke camp with the team. I'm guessing that you're Spencer Steer.
It sure is. And in the beginning of the year, he was a guy I loved to play against lefties, but his splits have evened out. Lefties and righties, he hits them both. And per Ken Rosenthal, it's India that'll go, not Spencer Steer. I believe in Ken's tweet, he has Spencer Steer listed at first and third base, which, I mean, he can play both. So, but he's definitely a guy you want to have moving forward, I think.
He's so fast, he can move across the diamond the longest way possible and cover both on a double play to himself.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you count that as a 6-4-3 when it's the same guy playing, or a 5-4-3 when it's the same guy playing the 5 and the 3?
I mean, might as well count it, but it's interesting. But shout out Ken Rosenthal for that tweet. But
I'm fine with Spencer Steer. I like him. He's got and by the way, if you count his minor league eligibility in some leagues, he does count as a second baseman because that's all he played coming up with the Reds. So yeah, if he's still out there, I don't know why he would be. I'm not concerned about Eli De La Cruz coming up for him.
Yep, De La Cruz will come up. He'll get a spot, but nothing to fret. Pick up Spencer Steer if he's available. But Matt, that'll do it for this week. We will see you next week with the newest edition of the